So here we are in our very last week of case analysis lectures. This week we're going to be talking about an individual, not a company or an industry of companies, but just one person. And we'll look at this case study, which is an essay by John McPhee called Brigade de Cuisine. And we're going to try and understand the goals and the circumstances in which Otto is operating and figure out what strategies he's adopting to try and achieve the goals he's trying to achieve. All right, who wants to begin? Oh, one thing I should say is this time I'm going to be even more stringent. I'm going to set a timer. We're going to spend 15 minutes on goals, 25 minutes on the external and internal situation, and then the rest of the time on kind of thinking about the actions and how they map onto the situation that we're in. So I'm going to set a timer for myself, 15 minutes. Who wants to start?
I can start.
Go for it.
Yeah, I can start. So, as it seems from the article, Otto really likes food. Well, I'm just going to take a bite of pizza before continuing. But it seems to me that he really only has one superordinate goal, which is just to make the best food that he possibly can.
Yeah.
And it seems that to a large degree, sorry, I'm just swallowing my chorizo there. He's organized his entire life around that. Yeah. And you can tell that by the way he set up his kitchen, the way he set up his garden, the way that he talks about food to John McPhee, the author. It seems like it's the thing he cares the most about. And that's the main thing he wants to do. I don't know if anyone would have more detail to add to that, or whether they'd be able to identify subordinate goals under that.
From my own perspective, what you are saying is perhaps a subordinate goal rather than a super goal. I mean, it depends on the perspective, of course. I feel the super goal for him is to live a life consistent with his life principle and philosophy.
Yeah, I agree with that. And kind of romantically and tragically recapturing a lost youth. Everything's referenced to where he came from, including the menu.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, even for, when was this written? 76, this wasn't a groundbreaking menu.
Okay, cool. So how do we feel about this? So one possibility is that he's got a superordinate goal, which is to live a life that's consistent with some quite unusual principles, right? And quite unusual philosophy. Perhaps part of what he's trying to do is, well, actually, maybe this is a separate potential superordinate goal. I'm just going to put all of them down there in sequence, and then we can figure out where they fit. Okay. And then one possibility also for a superordinate goal, possibly a subordinate goal, is to make the best food possible with a real focus on quality as he defines it. I mean, I see all three of these things in the case. Can we try and figure out where some of this evidence is? So, Tom, that was the first one, how he sets up the kitchen and garden. Can we get some page numbers up? And Hung Lo, what do you see as examples of him trying to live a life that's consistent with some unusual principles or philosophy? Or while they're thinking about it, maybe Belinda, where do you see him trying to recapture lost youth?
The references on page 224 about his training, growing up in the Spanish hotel, to some degree 230 as well, and talking.
What was the first page number again?
224.
224. And then 230?
Yes, yeah, with Anne sort of talking about how he manages a service almost going into a fugue state.
Yes.
Where he's talking to his customers without even him necessarily knowing.
Right. Okay. How long? What do you think?
I think he is a very how to put it. He is characterized with very strong individualism.
Mhm.
So he likes to work alone. He hates interacting with others. And this kind of characteristics forced him to choose such a lifestyle, and he aims to maintain this lifestyle. That's what I feel.
Where do we see evidence of this? I mean, it definitely sounds true. Like we see it in the text, right? So where do we see that he has to work alone?
Page 196, he talks about chasing the never realizable dream of recapturing the wealth that he grew up in, and the need to do that individually because it's a memory and a process that only he understands.
Right.
Also, his army training.
Yeah.
Are those all on page 196?
No, page 183 is about him working alone, in contrast to
It's
a French kitchen with all of the different chefs.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Cool.
With the brigade.
Yeah.
He is
The brigade de cuisine.
Okay, very cool.
And then his approach to food and feeding. I like the references on 202 and 203, his perspectives on starvation, basically, and the abundance he responds to that.
202 and 203?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I need to quickly remind myself of this.
Cool. Okay, excellent. And what do we think of the fact that he insists on being anonymous? Like, how many chefs can we think of who will be as rigorously hard to find as someone like this? So that's another thing that's kind of woven all the way through as well. Okay, so I guess now the question for us is, what do we think is the most important thing for him of these three? So we've got three goals here, right? And we can kind of sort them out into subordinate, superordinate goals. Like, which one seems to be the most important thing?
I'd say the first one.
Cool.
I think making the food. He's basically like he does kind of have a business, but he's got like the minimum viable business that will enable him to live to the degree live it as consistently with his philosophy as he can, really. Mm-hmm. And so I guess the anonymity is part of that.
Yeah. Cool.
Or at least the modesty.
Well, one of the things that I think I would like us to talk about later is, what does anonymity do to your ability to do whatever it is that you want without having to worry about other things, right? So that's something which I hope we have a chance to talk about later on. Okay, so let me put this down. Okay, what more do we need to say about this, if anything? Do we need to say more about it? Are there more goals that we need to talk about? Do we need to modify these?
Referencing the anonymity, page 186, direct quotes from customers, assuming they were direct quotes.
Yeah.
He should advertise, he could advertise, but he doesn't. That would be making a commercial venture out of work.
Yeah. What I think there's another one that's it is inconceivable to imagine how his business could be run to make less money. And so
that's the same.
Certainly, yeah. Oh, is that from the same quote?
Oh, okay, cool.
Oh, amazing.
But could advertise, he doesn't. Somehow that would be making too much of a commercial venture out of his work. It's inconceivable to imagine how his business could be run to make less money.
Yeah. So, and again, I hope we talk about this later on, but what does setting yourself up so that you can make no money and still be able to do it do for you, right? That's one question that I think maybe we'll come back to later on. Okay, cool. So we actually have some time to go, but maybe we should sort of crack on. and talk about the external situation, the constraints and opportunities and stuff like that. Should we do that?
Yeah.
Great.
Revisit.
Let's crack on.
Let's crack on, as they say. Maybe this will be one of the short case studies that we do. The other ones have been over an hour and a half each, which is not good. Okay, anyway, so external situation. What do we think?
Okay, so constraints, you've got the location, which is an opportunity as well,
Yeah.
frustratingly, for the purpose of discussion.
Okay, so let me put that down. Can we say more about why the location's a constraint?
Yep, absolutely. So page 184, they refer to it specifically as daily news country. Page
Okay.
212 is referred to.
What does daily news country mean?
Not necessarily sophisticated market, and that's reinforced through the use of Tank Town on 212.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's on the Manhattanite Pilgrimage Trail.
Yeah.
Due to distance.
So it's people who are not sophisticated neighbors, but.
And he refers specifically, yeah, but it's close enough for other people.
Yeah.
And there's, of course, the direct reference to, on 184, the senator who crosses state lines to visit, and the tennis star who parks his car right out the front.
Yeah. Metropolitan sophisticates. Cool.
Being a tank town, that.
Tank town. What does that mean? Tank town.
Well, so it comes from the vernacular that it was a town which pretty much was a stopping point for transport, trains, etc.,
Right.
to fill with water and fuel. So the
Right.
town served very little purpose and a place to pass through.
Okay.
Which is pretty much where I grew up.
Balaclava. Well, maybe not balaclava. Cool. What else?
I have another song also relevant to location, but it's a bit different.
Yeah.
Because the articles mentioned lots of details about how he went shopping, and I mean, he has a very sophisticated understanding of different ingredients in different shops and how to pick them, how to choose them. Yeah. So, and another, maybe we can talk more later. Another action he is going to do is they're going to move to some new place.
Yeah.
So if they move to the new place, the familiarity will be useless. I mean, he will need to get used to the new environment. So I think that constrains his movement as well.
Okay, so how do we phrase that, right? So I think there's one aspect of the environmental constraint, which is location. He's far away from people who are, good customers, so to speak. Another aspect of the location constraint, there's actually two parts of it, right? One of them, which Hong Long was just talking about, is because he's so far away and he can't just be like in a big city where everything is easy. He has to learn how to be where he is specifically. And so he is kind of stuck where he is because he's learned how to be there so precisely. How do we phrase that?
I think in terms of it being a constraint, this is internal as well to go into, but it's the conflict. It's a constraint on his approach. And you see the way he makes the trip to New York on Mondays.
Okay.
He talks about foraging, diving, and yet he's at the supermarket and spending excessive amounts of time supermarket shopping in places that he doesn't appreciate either. Then at the same time, whether driven by him or happening externally anyway, they talk about on 211 the quiet revolution that's happening in the supermarkets, being able to buy bean curd and egg roll wrappers.
Yes. How do we phrase these constraints and opportunities? And Hong Long, maybe you could also put in the evidence for this second constraint that I've just written in there.
Okay.
I mean, from my perspective, it seems like the location has a constraints and opportunities associated with it, both on the supply side, as in of supply of ingredients and other, mainly ingredients, and on the demand side, as in supply of people who are willing to come to a restaurant like his. Mm-hmm. And I would echo what Belinda said on the constraint side, which is one of the opportunities of his location is not only is it kind of just close enough to New York to like do the shopping in the supermarkets, you know, a 3 Michelin star restaurant in a big city. He has his own garden where he basically grows everything he not everything he needs, but many of the things that he needs. He's kind of almost runs half his own supply chain.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, I don't know if the demand side supply side split is the way to phrase this, or whether there's a different way to do it.
Yeah. Let's try and put some of these ideas out there, because I think a lot of how we should think about his external situation and internal situation comes down to issues of why he's chosen to be so far away, right? So I think some of the things that we've already highlighted are, if you are that far away, you're far away from ideal customers. If you're that far away, you can't just be like another fancy restaurant in the city. You have to learn how to be the kind of fancy restaurant that would be where you actually are. And I think, like Tom was saying, there's opportunities that arise as a result. You know, it's cheap enough out there to have lots of space. You can have a garden that you can cook from in a way that you couldn't do in a big city. I think there's lots and lots of aspects of being in this particular location that are useful as well as constraining. So what else are there? And what I'll do is I'll just put them in there first, and then we can unpack them and pop them open into different rows later on. So he's just close enough to ideal customers. It's cheap enough to have lots of space. What else is there? Do people come to his restaurant, I guess, if they're just kind of, the only people who come to his restaurant from far away, are they indifferent to the restaurant? Or are they really loyal customers?
For the most part, very loyal.
Yeah. So I think there's something interesting there about, it's like a filtering mechanism, right?
Yeah, that's not. Yeah. It's costly to go, so you only go. You're more likely to get repeat customers than you are just chances who are gonna,
and the
make their way there
as well. I mean, state senators, mafia, direct reference.
Yeah.
Where are these really loyal customers? Like, what pages are those pieces of evidence on?
The first several page.
Yeah, it's near the beginning.
Give me some numbers.
There's one really good segment, let me just find it, about how, I think it's someone who works for an ad agency, basically describing it as like a fairy tale that actually exists.
Yeah.
Customers who've spent 15,000 by coming twice a week.
Page number?
Yes, finding that.
Yes.
I've written it down and put the letter P, but no actual page, so that's helpful.
There you go.
It's almost there.
Come on, Otto.
184.
184.
Talks about 184. He talks about the mafia.
Okay. There's lots of celebs who come as well.
Yeah, 185 is what Tom was referencing. It's no Southampton type of ways. The people there are nondescript. It's the only realizable fantasy I've ever had.
Right.
Okay, good find.
Okay, well, we can come kind of clean that up and like put more stuff in as we go along. What else is there? Like, what else are we seeing in terms of like constraints and opportunities that are in the environment for him?
There was a trend, which is, it seems the Americans at that point of time were changing to a lifestyle that are less likely to appreciate this kind of old style way of
Interesting. Okay.
running the
Yes.
restaurant.
Okay. How do we phrase that? So one of the external constraints is popular taste for restaurants is it's basically moving away from the kind of classical continental style of restaurant he's trying to run, right?
Yeah.
Put a capital C in there. When was the last time you saw a continental with a capital C? Not attached to a tire.
Especially with a capital C written by you. You never use capital letters.
I'm using capital letters all the time. I'm trying my best. Okay. Where where do you see evidence for this in the text?
Yeah, it's around page 240.
Cool. Yes, excellent. And what is the evidence?
So the article was talking about like that a new company produced the foreign stuff, and then they also mentioned Otto's case to the CEO, and then the CEO say that kind of thing has been out of style.
Yes. Okay, for sure. Cool. Great. What else?
The whole section on the what's it called? Wild foods, industrialization of production, reducing fat content, etc. So that's 236, 237, 238.
Okay.
I mean, cryotransfer. That sounds
cool.
delicious.
I've got a question, which is, so the constraints and opportunities that we're identifying here seem to be quite in line with thinking about Otto as a business. But should we also be thinking a bit more generally about Otto as a person?
Yes, absolutely. Because for individual entrepreneurs, often who you are as a person is very much connected to what your business does, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And I think that's incredibly tied up in the internal as well, the fact that he is both an opportunity and a constraint.
Yes, definitely. But before we go down to there, because I think when we look at the external situation, for I think obvious reasons, the external situation that any person faces is going to be a little bit about who they are, but mostly about the environment that they're operating in, right? Then when you look at the internal situation, it's going to be much more about what Otto wants and what he's been doing to make the internal situation more rich in opportunities for himself and also lower in constraints for himself, maybe. But let's just finish up on the external situation for now. Like what else do we see in the external situation? Like what other opportunities are there? Where was the bit about supermarkets actually, where he was now able to find unusual stuff that he wasn't able to find before? Someone mentioned it before.
So that is 211, the quiet revolution. And the discussion on supermarkets overall, the wild trip, the journey was starts at 208, goes through to about 212.
Cool. Cool. I think there's a section about foraging, page 197.
Yeah.
Cool. What else? Anything?
I've lots to say on internal, which might feed back up.
Yep. Cool. Okay. So if nothing else for now, let's move on to the internal situation, and then we can maybe come back later on and kind of fill in a bunch of stuff. What is a really important constraint that, shows up a lot through here internally, that he responds to all the time?
Yeah. Just,
Okay.
I mean, the complete lack of efficiency, the fact that they are sole operators, and I appreciate these are equally opportunities.
Yeah.
And I use the word efficiency very judiciously.
Okay, so how do we frame it? They are.
Yeah. So, I mean, a constraint, and this is tricky because I've drawn it out over both deliberately because they are almost equal. The apparent lack of efficiency is actually just really well disguised strategic understanding of who they are and the skills that they have and the experience that they have.
Yep. Okay. So,
but it's also tied up in the personally arrogant approach of, I decide when customers eat.
Yes. So let's split it up. So on the one hand, there is what appears to be inefficiency, and then on the other hand, there is a clear understanding. I think this goes to what Heng Long was talking about as the superordinate goal before, a clear understanding of what's really important to them, right? Like they really know what matters, and everything else, they're just really like, screw it.
Yeah. And also what they do. I mean, the way that Anne talks about breaking down a service and who does what.
Yes.
And the reason that they don't use machines, the reason that they don't build up a big tech stockpile.
Yes. Okay. So let's put some evidence behind this. So where's all this stuff about order of service?
Okay. So
for inefficiencies, there's something on page 255.
Okay, what is it?
It's about he also made a mistake when he was very busy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So disorganized during service, but on the other hand, if you recall, he's actually really, really organized during prep and service, right? So
yes, and that's on page 230 where they break down a service.
Yeah.
And talk about the routines, and specifically, the author makes reference to the fact that an outsider interrupts these routines.
Yeah.
And they have to
what page is that on again?
230.
230, great.
And there's also reference to the way in which the site itself has been put together, 225 and 226.
Yeah.
A nonchalant miscellany of detail.
Yeah.
It's too pleasurable merely to have been flung together. Too thematic not to imply a tale. There's a deliberate approach.
So I think what's interesting is that the workspace, I think, Belinda, you're pointing to, is optimized for specifically how they want to work, right? And it looks kind of weird and kind of inefficient, but it's as if it had built itself around how they work, which I think is quite cool. In fact, I recommend watching a documentary film called I Like Killing Flies. It's about Kenny Shopson. It's also about some weird cook who does weird things because he really understands what he's trying to do. It's a great film. I'll link to it in Moodle. Okay, order of service. Where is that bit? Like how they break down what they do. 230 as well?
Yeah.
Cool, excellent. Okay, what else do we have?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh no, that's fine. I was just going to continue saying the same thing.
Okay, great. What else?
There's a, which again is a constraint, but there's a reference on page 251 to the more work you do, the more money you'll make. And they're specifically talking about a dish, and the reference is there's no profit in prawn cocktails, but that says everything about the way that they work.
Yes. How do we phrase that in a nutshell?
That sort of comes to that idea of externalized idea of what efficiency should look like.
Yeah.
If it takes 15 hours to produce 15 hours of effort to produce something which has a slightly higher margin, is that actually profit making?
Yeah. How do we say that? How do we say that?
It's to do with their individual beliefs, right? So it's something about their, a constraint on their profit is certainly the way that that their philosophy, their personal philosophy about how one should cook and what one should serve and what customers should eat. I'd say it's the actual beliefs that they hold.
Yeah.
And on 255 again, there's that line, dress slowly because we're in a hurry. Which I think speaks to that.
Is that a constraint or an opportunity?
That's both. They're inseparable.
Yeah.
It's the opposite of move fast and break things.
Yeah.
That's true. It is the opposite of move fast and break things.
Literally opposite.
Tom, so
slowly,
this personal philosophy about what and how to cook and how it limits their profitability, where do we see evidence of that?
Everywhere, but let me find. So there's some in the first. Find page
an example.
Yeah.
Which is on page 248. So there's a quarrel between Annie and a customer.
Yes.
In my eyes, it's that customer who was unable to appreciate the way of style they run the restaurant.
Cool. 248, you say?
Yeah.
Yes. Perfect. Yes. Brilliant. That's a great story. Excellent. What else?
For me, another constraint is Otto needs to keep innovative.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because there's mentioned that even for the frequent customers, he needs to provide new dishes for them every time they came.
Okay.
Yeah.
What page is that on?
That's that page I couldn't find, but it says specifically we owe it to them.
That's 184.
Nice.
Cool. Okay. And why is it a constraint?
Sorry.
Why is the constant need to innovate a constraint?
Well, because it's bound up with this idea of inefficiency or efficiency, right? Mm-hmm. So if you work out how to do something once, in theory, you should be able to do it faster or cheaper or more effectively next time.
Yeah.
And he kind of, the idea of like effectiveness, it doesn't seem like it's a word he would ever use. Yeah. Or if he would, it would be a completely different idea of effectiveness to the kind that you would see in a conventional management textbook.
Yeah. Cool. I just wanted to also put in one thing here: money. They don't have much of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's going to be my next one: being trapped in the economics of the current site as well.
Yeah.
The exact quote.
So.
Imprisoned in the economics, sorry, so it wasn't an exact quote.
Not quite verbatim.
No, that's
imprisoned in the economics of the current site. Of the present.
Is that one McPhee?
What page
is that McPhee, or is that the guy?
That's page 210 or 211. It's when they're on a drive, they're going around to the supermarkets, and he talks about wanting a new site. He feels imprisoned there, working for minimum wage, paying the insurance company, paying heating bills. And Otto says, I want a restaurant where heating bills and fire insurance are covered by the hors d'oeuvres.
Yeah.
Yes. Present site and the kind of customers Cool. There's also some very interesting things about how they reuse disposables.
Yes,
And
the egg McMuffin containers.
Yes.
On page 209.
And also, let's see, on page 209. What's on page 209?
That's the egg McMuffin reference.
Yes.
Reusing those containers if people want takeout. But it's fine because Otto never eats. So.
Only dessert for breakfast.
And at around 8,000 calories a day. I started noting, just to amuse myself, I noted all of the times that he does eat through it. And it's a full page documenting that.
They also never throw away equipment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. I think that's also
going back to and it goes back to the goal about wanting to produce the best food. I think one of his constraints is that he doesn't actually want to produce that for customers.
Yes.
There's constant reference to him saying the food is too good for them.
Yeah.
We will keep the best selections, etc. There's a good reference to that on page 221.
Okay, so let's call this a new constraint as well. I think the constraint, how do we phrase it? It's like,
it's again personal philosophy about who deserves, about the quality of the product needs to be in line with the quality or the appreciation or something to do with of the customer themselves.
That getting in the way of profitability.
It's kind of bound up with the one we highlighted earlier, but it's a separate belief.
Yeah.
What is the page?
Otto's not going to IPO anytime soon.
No, he's not going to IPO.
221.
221. So.
And the quote, I think, is something like, it would appear that the urchins are too good for the customers. And also, I mean, he talks about it in reference to parsley roots as well. I'll buy these will be amazing.
Yes.
They won't make it into the dishes.
Yeah. Well, on the one hand, he says that. And then on the other hand, if you look at the amount of work and time he puts into something, so where was that quote about spending a lot of time so that you can get a microscopic increase in pricing on, someone mentioned it before.
It's,
on the prawn cocktail.
Yeah, please hold on.
Cocktail.
Find it again. Yeah, so 251. The more work you do, the more money you'll make. There's no profit in prawn cocktails.
Which is actually not true. There is lots of profit in prawn cocktails.
If you spray them from a machine.
So I think one of the things that's emerging from this conversation about Otto and Anne is that they're really sort of in tension inside themselves, right? Like they really, really want to make really great things. But at the same time, they kind of look down on their unsophisticated customers. They don't want to make a lot of money because there's actually quite a lot of freedom in not making a lot of money. And at the same time, they also want to not be shackled by the economics of the site and the customers. It's like there's a lot of tension going on, which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of additional pressure that comes from actually having decent revenue.
Yes. More money, more problems.
So they say.
So they say. What are some opportunities?
I mean, the obvious one is Otto's encyclopedic knowledge of all things.
Yeah.
I guess mainly like French-inspired cooking, but I mean, inspired by his numerous experiences on the continent and elsewhere. He, like at the beginning of the book, I think it says, or the beginning of the excerpt, it says that he has an encyclopedic knowledge of over 600 appetizers alone.
Yeah.
Okay.
Quite a lot of
What page is that?
I think it's page 182.
Okay. What else? I mean, there's also all there's a story. I mean, all the kind of childhood, growing up stuff. What pages are those on?
So, growing up in the hotels and the very detailed understanding of his chef training, and is on 224.
Yeah. Cool.
And I do think it's relevant, but the army training, and it's relevant and telling in two ways. One is that he left the officer corps because he didn't have independent wealth, which tells a lot about the army.
What page is that?
Yes. Just find that.
Snap.
There's no search on this PDF, so.
You know, I tried to put in a text layer, but it turns out that this particular typeface does not OCR very well. C'est la vie.
So I'm searching in the actual article on the line. I'll reference it back to a page. He's talking about, I wouldn't have minded staying in the army. To tell you the truth, I had a wonderful time. I liked the power of leadership. I found it intoxicating.
Yes.
But the reason I left was I didn't have an independent income.
That's 225.
Cool.
Brilliant. And
So
work.
I think the interesting thing about this is. Go ahead.
No, go.
I love Zoom. What are we saying about the army training in relation to this encyclopedic knowledge? So it's clear that one of the real sort of assets, as Tom said, is that he and Anne know so much, right? So they have like lots and lots of knowledge in their heads. It's a bit like Azafami with the jewelry many weeks ago. So what does the army training, how do we understand the army training in the context of being an opportunity? Or an internal resource, I guess.
That plus the chef training, which happened around that, its ability to execute.
Yeah, cool.
You see how he manages stress as opposed to Anne managing stress in the kitchen. She walks in repeatedly and asks to be fed because she's simply fading away.
Yes,
I
indeed.
must have mashed potato.
Indeed, lots of other. Okay, what else do we have in terms of opportunities, constraints? I mean, there must be more opportunities, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think at least the customer consider him to be educated, sensitive, intelligent, some kind of an artistic, which is unusual for cooks.
Yes.
Yeah, there's that constant reference, isn't there, to their intelligence, and that they've probably read the same books and seen the same films that the customer has.
Yeah. So there's some.
Yeah, I would even almost go further. He's almost in some of the quotes at the beginning, he's referenced like a kind of almost mythical or like fantastical person, because it's like someone who is like, you know, could have been like a prime minister's aide or something, and some member of like the British establishment, but instead runs the best restaurant in the world out of a hovel in the middle of nowhere, which I'm trying to find the specific quote. It's from one of the, I think it might be from the Ad Man again. Let's see if I can find it.
185, I think, Tom.
Yeah, I'm looking then now.
I think Hong's putting in the evidence right now. One thing which I wanted to sort of ask about is, so when I was reading this, I've now read it so many times. I love this. I love this essay. It is this idea that, you know, many people know how to cook, and then only some people know how to really make food more than some chefs have the ability to make food into something which is beyond what most chefs have the ability to do, right? So I think the quote is arrows to point to the essence of materials. Not every chef has the ability to do this. I don't know how you all think about it. I wonder whether this is a resource for them. Because it seems as though they have really loyal customers who come because there's some kind of revelatory experience that they get when they're at the restaurant.
Yeah.
So maybe it's connected to this artistic sensibility and intelligence.
I think that's true. I think it's not necessarily innovation that's bringing people in. It's knowing that you get familiar but change at the same time.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a real comfort element to the food that he's preparing throughout, and the fact that he will adapt the mafia meals to family style.
Yeah. So what do we say is this resource, right? Is the ability to
it's I think it's kind of like what we're talking about in the Apple case, right? It's the familiar.
Yeah.
It's more dynamic or organic than in the Apple example, but it's the familiar. What do they call it? It's familiar novelty, I guess, or I don't know. There was a quote from that. I can't remember exactly what it was.
Yes. Before we move on, Belinda, where was the mafia family meal thing?
Oh, that's at the beginning.
Yeah.
Got the beginning down pat, guys.
184, I think, from memory, but yes, 184.
Okay, and that's actually something different. So, mafia family meals. I think that's actually something different.
About tailoring.
It's the ability to tailor the product to the customer if the customer is worth being tailored for.
I mean, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's the thing. He's not. It's almost like there's only a brief recognition of the economic advantage of providing different meals for people who come twice a week.
Yeah.
He does acknowledge that it keeps them on their toes, but it's his own personal journey that's driving it. I think that's quite obvious.
Yes.
Giving them permission to sit and eat.
Where is the evidence for this ability to make things feel new, even if they also feel familiar? It's like it's sprinkled throughout, but let's have a couple of page numbers or something in there.
Yeah,
so you can see it.
There's also one on page 184, where they're talking about the couple who splashed $15,000 on the restaurant, who come twice a week.
Yeah.
I thought it was a month, but it's twice a week.
Okay.
I don't know if you're aware of this. Yeah, we owe it to them.
Yeah, let me just pull it. I know it's here somewhere.
It's me.
Keep us on our toes is the quote.
Yes, here it is. There it is.
And all that time, he has never failed to have on his menu at least one dish they have not been offered before.
Is that also 184?
Yeah, cool. That's all the same passage.
Cool. Great. Okay. Other resources?
I think it is. He talked about.
Yeah, I think he has a very good learning capability.
Yeah.
Which is reflected by, first of all, he is not reluctant to learn something new if he didn't really touch it. That's on page 222.
Yeah. Cool.
And also, he quite frequently go to the local restaurants or other place to offshore their knowledge and then combine some piece of thing to his existing knowledge to produce new dishes.
So he's not too proud to like learn from wherever he can learn from, right?
Yeah.
What page is that on?
I will put it.
Yep. Cool. Cool. Great.
Further to the tailoring.
Yeah.
further to the tailoring, there's that reference on 234 to the wretched people in the developments who are coming. But despite their wretchedness, he's buying the most expensive beef.
Yeah.
To a standard he wants.
From the developments. New builds, I think they would call them in the UK. Resourcefulness. Cool. What other examples of resourcefulness does he have in there? I think there was something on 218. Yeah, okay.
Great. I mean, there's it's almost half a page just talking about how he could break down a sea urchin.
Yep. Page 221.
Behavior. Like, how can I layer these flavors in a way that people won't expect, they don't understand, and also means that Anne and I can eat half of them.
Okay. There is a lot of snide, kind of snide, but in a good-natured way, criticism in there, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I love the references. He's less pompous now than when I met him.
Yeah.
It's true.
And that's from his wife.
Cool. Okay.
Do you think he and Anne can complement with each other, can be counted as a resource?
Yes.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, for sure. Let's put that in. Let me just add a row.
Because it seems, well, except for Anne, nobody else could bear with him in the kitchen.
Put that down. Yeah.
Okay.
Michael Porter will be proud.
Correct.
High level fit. What does he call that? Second order fit? Third order fit?
So the highest level order of fit is when each thing that is fitting with everything else mutually reinforces it, right? So they can't work without each other, and when they're all together, they work better than, it's
anything else.
Mutually optimizing fit. We should put this onto a separate line. I think that this is actually it's a different thing in itself, right?
Okay.
Just put that down there. Cool. What have I done? Yeah. Talk about using a framework. Okay. So
walking in randomly saying Jesus saves and Moses invests and leaving the room.
Cool. Okay. Since as usual we are coming up on time again, why don't we quickly, let's just get this done and then let's move on to the next page. I don't want to compare. It's true. Totally true. Okay, very good. Yeah. Great.
Can you change the font?
Yes, I will. Yeah, thank you very much. I know it's very strange, right? Like I have strange, very, very strange predilections. Okay, let's move on to the next page where we talk about actions consistent with whatchamacallits. Okay, let's see if this will work. I don't think it will. It didn't work. Very annoying. Okay. Anyway, start thinking about these things while I copy these things down. Oh, what's going on there? Huh. That's very strange. Okay. Well, like I said, start thinking about what actions were taken in relation to these goals.
Well, one thing I'm curious about, and to what extent this should frame the next part of this conversation, is where should, when you're analyzing the actions that an individual is taking over their life, from what point should you start thinking about the actions that they've taken, right?
Yeah.
So is it only now that we're thinking about Otto in his restaurant with Anne, or are we thinking about the earlier decisions he took, to be in the army and to go to work in all these various kitchens?
Yeah, and to not go into hotel management.
Yeah. I think it's a really good question. I'm very curious what you all think about it. My sense is you choose what makes sense, right? So I think the important thing to point out, I guess, is the kinds of actions we're talking about that are strategic are always intentional. So you do something because you are trying to achieve a particular outcome. I think in some cases, let's say you're sent to boarding school. That's not an action that you could have, it's not an action that you took strategically. It's something that happened to you. So that's one filter. Usually what happens earlier in life is not as volitional because we have no choice about it. Sometimes what happens later in life is also not so volitional. That can be problematic too. But okay, anyway, what actions have they jointly taken, I guess, to live a life consistent with these life principles and philosophy?
Well, I mean, staying in the inn for as long as they have, even though they know they're moving on at the point of this article.
Yep. So, let me make this size smaller. All right. So staying at the current location.
Yeah, and also just being really private to the point of pseudonymity, and not advertising at all. Is kind of tied in with being private.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just list all these out and we'll talk about them in more detail, I guess. What else?
Their illegal plants, referenced a few times, but their wider approach to life philosophy.
Yeah, they're slightly anarchist in a weird way. Yeah. But I do think that is an indicator of that they buck all of the trends like we talked about before. A non-industrialized approach to the way they do business. Non-industrial.
Yeah. What's the quote that my own bloody way?
Yeah.
That's the one. MOBW.
You can't expect me to change the habits of a lifetime to accommodate your whim.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah, that's spoken only by someone who grew up in a hotel with a bunch of servants, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's conceivable.
Love it.
One of his great disadvantages, as he says.
I'm sorry?
Yeah.
Great advantages?
He says that growing up in the hotel was one of his great advantages.
One of my great advantages.
Okay.
I actually know someone who's a bit like this person.
Do you? Interesting.
Yeah, who's currently running a failing. Well, I used to work for his company. I won't actually identify it by name. Never mind. But that's probably not in a public. In a video being recorded, I shouldn't do that.
Correct.
But yeah.
Okay. Let's talk about how this strategic action takes advantage of this firm's internal. Actually, before we do that, let's put some page numbers in here. So where is the evidence for them choosing to stay at the current location, even though they're thinking about moving on?
Yeah, well, I guess the point at which they talk about moving on is the evidence that they've chosen to stay there for that amount of time.
Yeah.
Because he says up until now it's been tolerable in order to deliver what we wanted. And the page for that.
It's last page, I think.
Possibly.
208, where he's talking about the being trapped by the economics, imprisoned by the economics.
Okay. Cool. Okay, so let's talk about how these strategic actions like kind of take advantage of the constellation of internal and external constraints and opportunities that they face. So why does staying at the current location, despite being imprisoned by the economics, help them do this stuff?
They're well adapted to their current location. It suits their lifestyle extraordinarily well if you judge it by their waistlines.
Yes. What do you mean by adapted to their current location?
Well, I just mean they're used to it in all senses. So that they're used to it as in they have really personal relationships with their customers. They have a garden that they maintain themselves. They know the intimate details of where to go and what to look for in sourcing ingredients. All of their, they've set up their kitchen extremely idiosyncratically with the leather chair and TV in it.
Cool. I'm just going to put those in. Can you all kind of throw in page numbers as relevant in there?
Cool. I'll find them.
I think there's also something to be said for how it's clearly inexpensive enough that they can afford to run a restaurant the way they want to run it, even if it doesn't necessarily make a lot of money, right? So being imprisoned by the economics is kind of a two-way street. On the one hand, they don't make that much money. On the other hand, they don't have to make that much money.
Yeah.
Cool. And I think there's also something important about staying at the current location, precisely because of what Belinda highlighted at the beginning, of it being simultaneously far enough away that it prevents kind of know-nothings from coming, while also being just close enough that people who do know something about what they're trying to produce, they're able to come, right? So I guess I would say the remoteness of the location is a filter for the kinds of customers who appreciate what they're doing. Okay, great. Why is remaining private and not advertising the restaurant something which is a strategically valuable action?
So I think from Otto's point of view in particular, it's about him not wanting public scrutiny of anything he does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think scrutiny is the key word.
Yeah.
You can't imagine, based on the way that he cooks is described, that everything is like compliant with the best health and safety regulations, for example.
Yes.
Like when he picks the pan floor and pushes some ingredients back in and keeps going.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And how he eats a bit of raw pork every time he makes his sausages.
Yes.
Like, I don't think the FDA is keen on that.
Probably not so. What else?
He takes a clam from the dish to give to McPhee, and then like covers it up with his finger and gives it to the customer. Well,
no. He puts it back in to be gratiné again, and then it's important. It sterilizes it.
Yeah.
What else does remaining private mean for the kinds of customers who do come, right? So I think there's another sort of aspect to the privacy or pseudonymity of it, which is if nobody knows about it, it's the opposite of being Insta famous today, right? So you don't have all the Insta famous seeking riffraff showing up.
Yeah, It's as we talked about before, it sounds like they have the sort of underworld of customers, mafia, politicians, sports stars.
Mm-hmm.
People who don't want to be seen.
Yes.
But like eating bone marrow.
Mm.
Okay, great. And if you all could go in and put in some page numbers on all these things, that'd be good too. So this non-industrial, non-efficient approach to running the business, what's some evidence for that, and why does that take advantage of the particular internal and external circumstances that they're facing?
I think that is consistent with his personalities. He vanity, but he also like appreciate, but the appropriate appreciate.
Yes. Personalities. And I guess it also takes advantage of the fact that this non-industrial, non-efficient approach, it's consistent with who they are as people. They're quite idiosyncratic. They're not necessarily super efficient themselves. And it's possible to do this in that location because it's cheap enough, again, for them to run a restaurant that isn't efficient and still have it be viable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
183, there's that specific reference to his complete disregard for standard kitchen brigades, largely due to the lack of education of the people involved.
What page is that? 183?
That's that's my favorite quote in the whole thing.
Yeah. Well, there are some other good ones towards the end, Tom.
Oh, good. Yeah, I remember them.
Okay. Cool. All right. I do not want this to drag on a long time. Let's quickly do the other ones. So what other goals, what other actions are here in relation to recapturing lost youth and the memories of lifestyle and food from his childhood? Actions in relation to this.
So one in relation to the scarcity mindset that's talked about quite a lot at the beginning is there's constant reference to the generosity, hence the takeout and take home containers.
Yeah.
Not just generosity
yes.
of size, but ingredients. I mean, it's proper last meal before hibernation cooking.
Yeah. Of portions, ingredient quality, method of cooking. And there's also generosity in service as well, right? It's one of these weird things where, in a way, this is the kind of restaurant that if you really like restaurants, you actually really want to find. It's not a business relationship restaurant. It's kind of like the restaurant where you have to know the people in order to be able to get the service, which is
yeah, the fact that
What are some page numbers? That mafia thing is probably let's see, 184.
Nailed it.
Cool.
Oh, actually, that's different. Ingredient quality, that's...
Yeah, again, methods of cooking and making family style, the people from the developments reference again.
Yes, people from page 234. Quality. Cooking. Classical. see. Page 182. Cool. Okay. What else?
So yeah, the replacement ingredients, yes, the roe, shad roe.
Yeah. So there's one thing with veal on page 218. What other pages do we have? What's the shad
There's
roe?
the shad, yeah, flounder and shad roe, that's on 213.
Yeah, cool.
And also
Great.
in terms of not just ingredients in the food, but talking about smoking chips, for example, page 199. He works with a local carpenter, but goes to the supermarket when he has to.
Yes. Yep. Cool. Agree. Okay.
And I think as well, not just in his approach, but in the way he talks about cooking. He talks about that visit to the fish and chip shop.
Mm-hmm.
Not that he eats, but when he does go there 3 or 4 times a week, he
just to look at how they're doing things.
Exactly. But the fish, he says the fish is barely acceptable, but the batter is delicious. It has no flaws.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so idiosyncratic.
I've never had good fish and chips in the US. Interesting.
It is possible.
No.
Yeah. So what page is the fish and chip thing on?
So it would be around 208. Let me check. Because it starts from then finding the vinegar wrappers on the dashboard.
Yeah. Yes, it does. Where else do we see actions?
209.
209, great. Ingredient quality. Where does he, laborious preparations?
Well, I mean, the laborious when he's talking about the prawn cocktail again.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find where is that prawn cocktail. Prawn cocktail.
That's 251.
Okay, great.
Also, the discussions of how Anne cooks throughout her baking.
Yes. Any specific references for that? There's one with the Dequoise, I recall, but where is it?
Yes, I'm trying to find the page. Or it's probably in the same section where they're talking about how they break down service, so around 230. Let me double check.
Yes. Yeah, most of the urchins.
Yeah, urchins definitely.
I think that's 221.
Yeah.
So.
I'm just rereading about their fights.
$230, I believe. No, that's not it.
No, 230 is just about the breakdown of service. How she can cook just as well, but can't deliver.
Yeah.
In that context.
Okay, well, you will find it. Meanwhile.
I will find it.
Yes. So let's just kind of unpack a little bit. Generosity of portions, ingredient quality. Why do all these things take advantage of the internal and external constraints and opportunities that they face? This one's an interesting question. Like, I would find it hard to answer this question. How does this action make it work?
Well, I mean, the main thing in this context is it sets them apart from everywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
That in addition to location.
That's super interesting, actually.
The move towards very, very homogenous, very generically styled, generic tasting food.
Yeah.
Their food is very homemade.
Yes.
And I love the sour cream story in there.
What's the sour cream story?
They were talking about baked potatoes through, and as we all know, in the US, you get your foil steamed baked potato on the side of every meal.
Yes.
Which I love. So there's 2 pages on the fact that that's not a baked potato anyway, but then a customer orders sour cream, and after a moment of rage and realizing he doesn't even have sour cream, he drops all other elements of service to pick up some cream and add other ingredients to it and make this for the customer, because if they're going to get it, they'll get the best they've ever had.
What page is that on?
I don't know. I'll find out.
Yeah. Sour cream story. I'm just going to put a placeholder there. Okay. So it sets them apart from the food trends in America. I think that's true. Why else is it a good thing for...
I think that setting them apart is also interesting in the fact that it also sets them apart from other haute cuisine restaurants, right? Especially the family style nature. Like imagine going to a 3 Michelin star restaurant and ending up with 8,000 calories worth of food. Is like you have to spend thousands of pounds to do that.
Yeah.
But here you can do it on a budget. I think it's partly taking advantage of the fact that they grow their own stuff.
Yeah.
And they sort of understand, as we've spoken about earlier, that they're really well adapted to where they live, and so they can make the most of everything that's available to them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. We didn't
also think
about, so sorry, just one quick thing. We didn't talk very much about comparisons with high-end restaurants in cities before. I think it's a very good point, but we see a few instances of it in the text. And so Tom, maybe you could pull it out and kind of cite it while we're talking about this next thing. Okay, sorry, Helen, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering if they also take advantage of the kind of the mutual familiarity or understanding. Otherwise, they will have the freedom to do this kind of thing to recapture the North Young's memories.
Okay. How do we phrase that?
Take advantage of the mutual understanding with customers to waste some freedom, something like that.
That's true, actually. So I think it takes advantage of, I guess, regular customers who want what they're trying to provide, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this would be all that stuff in the first few pages, I guess. Page 184 to, I think it's 186.
Yeah.
I think the discussion of the potatoes and the sour cream, and there's a passage in there as well about only providing vegetables when people ask for it.
Yes.
About the different, I'm not going to waste it. I'm not going to provide this if people don't actually want the vegetables.
Yeah.
And then in looking that up, I'm reminded of the miniskirt waitress story.
Contemptible.
Yeah.
So, okay, great. Now, this other thing, cooking classically, but using replacement ingredients where necessary. I guess the cooking classically thing, it takes advantage for sure of, Otto Ann's knowledge of classical cuisine and recipes. What else? Again, I guess it sets them apart from these food trends. Oh, hang on, let me just put a note in there. Where is it? Where is it? There we go, 236. Great.
I think there's something as well. They're set apart from food trends. So the story about why they ended up in the US anyway,
Mm-hmm.
and it being described as a mistake, sort of speaks to why the menu is still stuck in Middle Europe as well, I think.
Say more.
So they came to America by accident.
Yeah.
The story was, it was about educating Anne's oldest child, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And Otto then talks about how he felt displaced from his food community. So he went and found what he knew.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So what page is that on?
Yes.
So in a sense, it's a consequence of finding themselves in a new place.
Yeah.
In America. And wanting to do something that feels familiar, but with what resources are available to them, right?
Yeah. So they knew they wanted to leave Spain. They tried New Mexico, realized it wasn't Spanish enough.
New Spain.
Found their community.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. So that's in the bit where they're talking about how they break down service. So that would be 230, I guess.
Cool.
Let me cross-reference that.
Yes.
Yeah, 230.
Cool. Okay. Now, let's just do these and then we'll be finished. Okay, so the first thing. So this does not seem like a very conventional fine dining restaurant. It, in many ways, sounds quite shambolic, right? So they're clearly not just trying to imitate a fancy restaurant. What they've done is they've created a restaurant, both in terms of service and in terms of the food that they cook, that has a very specific idea of what quality means that's really idiosyncratic. So why does this take advantage of the specific constraints and resources that they face where they are?
I will say if this is a high-end restaurant,
Yeah.
the uniqueness will be less surprising. But as Anne said, we just produce simple food. So it will be, for me, it will be surprising to find a normal restaurant to have this style.
Okay. So because they're in this remote location, I guess the remote location makes it possible for them to do this weird kooky thing, right? Like people are already coming so far that I guess the
control.
Yeah.
It's control of all of the elements, what you're going to serve, which ingredients you choose to use, where you source them from, when your customers may or may not sit down.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is basically the integration of most of the things that we've already described above, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm
With the
just trying to
exception of
articulate.
maybe the.
Yeah, I'm just trying to articulate what it is, because I think we all understand it, but I want to be able to put it down. I think one of the things that is true is because it's remote and because it's cheap, they get to do whatever the hell they want.
Mm-hmm. Which goes back to that quote about what he enjoyed about being in the army.
Yeah.
Mm. And I guess it's because it's as much because it's remote, so it's removed from, like, you know, it's kind of in a backwater,
Yeah.
and so you know, maybe there are a few intervening forces, like the rent isn't as high, etc. They have a bit more space to grow their illegal plants, but also it's the remoteness that means that the customers who do come are willing to let them get away with whatever they want.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
They're as trapped as they are willing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a trap. Okay.
And simply put, I will say they take advantage of the very good sales selection contest.
I'm sorry, the very good.
Sales selection contest.
Yes, that's true. Loyal, that's a very, very good phrase. Is there anything else? So there's a remote, inexpensive location. That's good. The customers are loyal and self-selecting. What else is in
But it's
there?
not inexpensive. It's not inexpensive. That's the thing they talk all the time through. It may be in some ways, but they talk about how much more disproportionately expensive it is to run the place.
Yes.
Because of the remote location.
Yeah.
Paying for heating, etc.
Yes, it's not in, well, so the location itself is remote and inexpensive, but it creates the problem of making operations slightly more expensive.
Yeah, but even when he talks about purchasing food, he said it's much cheaper to go to Manhattan and buy from the markets.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, but that's what I mean. It's like the operating of a restaurant that's in a remote, inexpensive location may be more expensive because you can't get supplies easily. You have to go into Manhattan to buy stuff. So it may be cheaper in Manhattan, but then you're still forced to go all the way to Manhattan and use up a day, right? Mm-hmm. Put on your bespoke suit and go to Cinderella. Okay. What else is in here that is relevant? I guess the fact that okay. Really need to put some pages in there. Let me do that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. It's kind of the tension of they would probably prefer to almost be in a more remote place if they could afford it. And so it's like this balancing point, which is like a spot which can make them just enough money to be self-sustaining and be kind of as far removed from polite society
yes,
as they can be.
Yeah.
Not swathed in ermine and mink anymore.
Well, no mink for sure. They're all coronavirus.
Oh.
Yeah.
True.
I think that's a really good point, Tom. The model they've chosen, it is self-sustaining, but it's day to day, and they can do that because of the immediacy and the access. You know, they're not running monthly books. They're panicking every morning.
Yeah.
No.
So
it's almost a subsistence existence of their own choosing, right? They've basically contrived a subsistence lifestyle for themselves that is subsisting in the way that they want to.
Yeah, that's true. Where does this go? It's such an insight.
It must be noted.
It really must
got any...
because it's important. I think it goes up here.
Do you have any more celebratory pizza to eat, Tom?
No, I haven't. I've eaten it all. I also finished my one beer as well. Beer in undisclosed location is, you know.
Wait, so Tom, say that again. They designed a subsistence lifestyle that allows them to subsist in the specific way that they want to, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And it gives them themselves plus the customer a perception of the abundance that we were talking about before.
Yeah.
The extreme generosity.
Yeah.
You know, living like that, they can respond immediately to the urchins coming in and then immediately eat them. That's not how a restaurant works.
Okay. I don't even know how to put this in, but it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Okay, while we're thinking about this, there are lots of brackets that need to have things inside them, so go for it.
I think it does allow them to be responsive. It's why they've stayed with the conversation, because this subsistence lifestyle does work there.
Yeah.
Because, as Henlong has said, they put so much work into understanding, knowing local suppliers, where to get the wood chips, etc. You know, it's
Yeah.
But the follow-up question is why they are going to move out if they succeed in keep doing this for a very long while.
I think the folly must end at some point. He probably needs to sleep.
Yes. Okay. I guess it's not just being responsive. I guess what they are is they're able to be opportunistic in a way that allows them to be quite happy with what they're opportunistic about, right?
Yeah, that's a good word.
Yeah. But this is this goes back to the original point. We had a similar point above about them being adapted to their environment, is that they're very intentionally decided to be where they are.
Yeah.
So that there is an abundance of, you know, of opportunities with regard to interesting ingredients.
Yeah.
That they you know, it satisfies, it scratches their own itches to do with, you know, constantly innovating in the kitchen.
Yes. Okay. Right. So shall we just sort of fill these in? Because I'm very, very conscious about the passage of time.
Yeah.
So using only high quality ingredients. What's that?
Nothing.
I guess that take advantage of Otto's old investment. I mean, in particular, his naval investment, because he like just sleeps for just a couple of hours and then wake up very early and then go to the market to pick the ingredients.
Okay, so
Sleep.
Cool.
I wonder if the fact that he had a lack of need for sleep is also why they had that sign about prophylaxis for early onset dementia to do with the plugs in the sink.
Yes, you should definitely watch I Like Killing Flies.
Okay,
I recommend it.
I'll watch it. I also apparently have to watch I know you're less interested in this, Vaughan, but the Tottenham Hotspur documentary on Netflix about Jose Mourinho is apparently very good.
Okay.
Different kind of idiosyncratic person with a unique view of what quality means for him.
Right. Okay. Let's just do this last one. Using only high quality ingredients. Why is that strategically wise to do?
Well, at one level, it's strategically wise because I think they would just hate it if they didn't have high quality ingredients.
Yes.
And also, he's able to identify the high quality ingredients by his knowledge.
Okay, right. So the first one is it accommodates their high standards for things and for food in general.
Because it's sometimes interesting to think, like, when something like this comes up, it's tempting to justify it by saying, oh, because, you know, customers like the higher quality meal. But in actually most cases, or many cases, they're actually saying the customers are undeserving of the high quality that they're providing, right? So the main reason why they use high quality ingredients is for themselves and for the way that they like to cook and like to source ingredients, and not actually for the end customer who's going to be eating it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, yeah, that's great. I'm just going to make a quick note of that. Cool. Great. Okay. Page numbers. We're so close. So close.
Yeah, and endeavoring to be short with this one is turning into the longest one ever.
It is turning, well, not quite the longest one ever. The other one was longer.
Yeah.
Was the quantum computing one longer?
Yes, it was actually longer than this. It's unbelievable.
I missed it.
Worth every minute.
It was only 15 pages though.
It was
Simple
only
stuff as well.
It's true. It's true. Where does he say that customers don't even understand this food? Yes, page 221. Great, got it. Where does it say that they've got really high standards for food in general? That's also probably page 221.
Yeah.
I think you can just pick a random number.
You can just pick a
range.
True.
It's quite likely to be justified on it.
That's true.
Yeah.
Okay. What else? Where's there evidence that they're designing a subsistence lifestyle?
Well, I'm not sure there is evidence. That's just me synthesizing.
Okay, well, find a way to evidence it. It's a really good insight.
Talking about the foraging, talking about the diving, talking about development of the garden, working with the ingredients they have rather than running to the shop.
Running to the shop.
So the diving and the foraging, that's
Gardening.
So
the garden is
paid. Is probably
paid.
Okay, so the subsistence lifestyle, I think, definitely a quote on page 186.
Oh, we got it twice.
Look at that. It's so good. It's like New York. So good they had to name it twice. Where is there evidence of them being opportunistic? The sea urchins is one example. That's 230, right? No, it's not. Where is the sea urchins? 220. Yes, 220 to 221.
There's a truffle story as well from memory where he's talking about the precision in Japanese cooking.
Yes, I remember that. But where is it?
I am to find. Getting quite hungry, I have to say. In reference to the subsistence one, page 222, we talk about skinning squirrels.
Skinning squirrels. Ah, where is this Japanese food thing? So annoying.
It is very annoying. Let me.
Okay, we'll find it. Methods of cooking. Belinda, you were talking about really generous cooking. Where?
Yes.
Where do we?
So I've added one reference. So the 209, where they talk about takeout containers, that talks about people being fed well.
Yes.
Otto is generous to a fault. The unwary amateur can eat his way into a stupor. 209.
Cool. 209. And there's also something about the richness of, okay, got it. 206. By the way, I found the decoise. It's on page 206 to 207. The decoise resembles cake and puts up a slight crunchy resistance before it affects a melting disappearance between tongue and palate and a swift transduction through the bloodstream to enlighten the brain as a poem. Beautiful.
Nice.
Very nice.
Does sound good.
It does sound quite good.
I like the soaking of lean chicken overnight in milk, but then frying it in pure raging lard.
Where's that?
Raging.
That's page 209.
Great. Okay.
On the same page, he talks about not drinking coffee, just 6 or 7 cups a day and maybe 20 cups of tea.
Yeah.
Real generosity.
Doesn't need much sleep.
I can't imagine why.
Does that also explain why Otto does not need
Sleep very much?
Yeah.
That may be it. Okay. I think that we are coming to a close, which I know everyone will feel very grateful for. Did we have any closing thoughts about this case? It is definitely a strange case, and I guess we should have said at the beginning, now I'll say at the end, that it's one way to think about how to live a life, right? It looks very much like something which, it doesn't seem like a good life, but maybe it is a good life. The jury's out on that one. Did any of you have closing thoughts, words of wisdom?
Well, I have a comment and possibly half a question, which is related to what you just said, Vaughan, which is like, it does seem like it's certainly a very unique perspective on what a good life is, and it's very idiosyncratic, but it also seems that it's taken a long time for them to get to the point where they're now, they're basically designed this subsistence lifestyle for themselves in exactly the way that they seem to want to live, which maybe no one else wants to live that way. But there's the thing that I'm thinking about when I read this from that perspective is, how on earth could anyone aim to end up that way? And if you wanted to do that, how would you even start?
It's a really good question. Belinda, What are your thoughts about this issue?
Having been through this, yes. I think, and this also spoke to me personally in an extension of that, the subsistence style of living doesn't allow you any time for any form of strategic reflection. And I think that's quite obvious. You can have musings as you're driving in a car, thinking about your next meal of fish and chips, but the ability to genuinely stand back, you don't allow yourself the space to do that. So that's incredibly important. Follow the dream, but don't fall into the trap.
Yes.
Don't fall into the vortex without the ability to find your way out.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, from my point of view.
Yeah. Well, so I think I'm curious what Hong wants to say to it as well, because if I hear Tom's question correctly, I understand it as asking, this kind of lifestyle, the good life, if you will, is so hard to imagine because it's so unlike what we normally think a good life might be, that it's hard to imagine how you would come to it intentionally, right? You might accidentally fall into it, like Belinda says, the vortex. But how do you mindfully design a life like this for yourself?
Well, first of all, in my eyes, the most important thing is first to identify what kind of life you really want. And then you just, how to decide a way to achieve the goal can, to a large extent, depends on your capability, your ability, how smart you are. But even for the smart people, they not necessarily know what exactly they want.
Yeah.
So for me, the first part is more important. And after you identify what you really want, that really depends on like how smart you are, your capability to make a good decision, and your social capital to collect others so that they can give some good suggestions to you.
Right. Yeah, I agree. A really big part of it, and I'm sure Belinda will agree as well, a really big part of this is knowing what it is that really matters, right? So this is something which came out. It's a resource for them, which is this clear understanding of what's really important and what they know how to do and want to do. I think to answer Tom's question, my reaction to it, and not saying this is necessarily correct, my response, I guess, is if you know what you really want, what you end up doing is instinctively doing things that over time, you don't always get actions correct, but you instinctively do things that gradually get you to the point where you stop doing the things that don't matter or that you hate.
Yeah.
And you end up continuing to do and doing more of the things that do matter, which you like. And then eventually you get to the point where presumably, you're in your 50s or something. And if you've been following your instincts like that over the last 30 or 40 years, maybe you are in a position like they are, right? Not necessarily conventionally successful, but they certainly seem like they've got, in a weird way, a pretty good life, which is cool. But I don't know if that's a useful answer. It's probably not that useful.
Yeah, I think it's definitely useful, or definitely like a good guiding principle. I think for me, like the most concrete thing that I would say is like how you would maybe be able to like start thinking about, ending up in a place like this is just identify the things that you're unwilling to compromise on. And I think that's something that Otto is just really good at. And like, that's one of the things I think that makes him pompous, but it's one of the things that probably also makes him really like likable and a good, like one of the reasons why all the customers become friends with him is because you can really like very clearly and quickly understand what he stands for and where he stands on things.
Yeah, I think that's true. And do the learning. I mean, all throughout it talks about repetition of tasks.
Yeah.
He's able to do what he does now because he put himself in the hot seat. He took risks. He understood his risk appetite, what he wanted to do and what he wanted to do. He can manage environments in deep flux because of this prior training. But the focus is always on delivering what he's interested in. And as you said, Vaughan, it's about iteration. You don't necessarily jump into a life like this, but you learn to understand which parts you're good at, which parts you're not, the social capital that Henlong talked about. learning from others, and also having that wider support network is really important.
Yeah.
And then working out what makes you happy, getting up every morning and deciding what drives you.
Yeah.
Simple and complex as that.
It is. Life lessons.
Yeah.
Anyway, very good. I think we are, now this is the longest case analysis section. Okay, anyway, that's a wrap. So actually, before we wrap, one thing to what Belinda and Tom and Heng Long have just been talking about is, for all the students, you may recall very early on, we had a worksheet that you could use to think about the goals that companies are trying to pursue. And one of the things that you do in this worksheet is you try and understand what they're willing to give up in order to achieve what they're trying to achieve. That is exactly, I think, what all of us have been talking about in this session, or at least at the very end of this session, which is trying to understand not only what you stand for, but what you're willing to give up to get what you're willing to stand for. I think that's very important. Anyway, okay, that's a wrap.